This is Happenus. I'm Sean Hong. Welcome to the show. Today, I'm joined by systems modeling expert Dr. Hossein Hosseini. Dr. Hosseini is a systems modeling research fellow at the Brain and Mind Center at the University of Sydney. His current work focuses on mental health policy analysis in Australia, where he uses system dynamics modeling to understand how mental health systems change over time and to explore possible points of intervention. I've been drawn to Dr. Hosseini's work because he moves across the world, from healthcare and energy to urban planning and business strategy, always looking beneath the surface and recognizing the most important patterns that exist in the configuration of pieces. With a PhD in socio-economic systems engineering, he builds simulation models that unravel connections most of us never see, guiding decision makers to see beyond the immediate moment and visualize the hidden connections in the complex systems we all inhabit. The heart of our discussion lies in challenging the notion of separateness. Mental well-being isn't isolated within individual minds, but lives in the complex web connecting us to our environments, our communities, and our institutions. We begin with what it means to be a system modeler, the gap between growing mental health awareness and the actual access to care, and how the Brain and Mind Center's Right Care, First Time, Where You Live program provides effective health and well-being solutions for decision makers to strengthen Australia's mental health system and help young people thrive. On the back half, we discuss how participatory approaches, especially including young people with lived experience, transform abstract systems into tools for advocacy while breaking down professional silos to create shared cross-sectoral understanding. We explore how simulation models serve as virtual testing grounds for policies amidst Australia's growing embrace of these approaches in policymaking, potentially avoiding unintended consequences and meeting more than one need at a time. We close with reasons for hope in mental health care's future, the power of system thinking in the fractal world, and how, in interconnected systems, every action creates ripples for meaningful change, and we need not wait for perfect alignment to be the change we wish to see in the world. Speaking with Dr. Hosseini and many other educators and healthcare professionals throughout my life reminded me that there are people who still deeply care about the well-being of others, that our capacity to serve and to love is still alive and well, even when they're not always in the spotlight and grabbing the microphone. Most importantly, they reminded me that wisdom, like our care for others, isn't limited to intellectual spaces, but in everyone, everywhere, that sharpens their ability to practice the constant act of keeping important conversations alive and passing down the torch. The mental health crisis faced by many of the world's 1.2 billion young people today cannot be understood in isolation, as it stems from interconnected local and global pressures, from socio-economic factors like housing insecurity and work-related stress, the weakening of real-life community connection, environmental concern due to climate change displacement, academic and family pressures, and exposures to violence and substance abuse. The sheer scale of these challenges calls for urgent and coordinated action. If we fail to act to alleviate these struggles, which are both uniquely personal and profoundly global, we risk an entire generation weighed down by mental health struggles, economic uncertainty, lost potential, and unfulfilled dreams. The good news is that collaborative global initiatives are emerging to fill the gaps, while some governments are grappling with systemic reforms in these gargantuan interconnected issues. We all can contribute in our own way. And the truth is, that overwhelming feeling of trying to provide solutions has always been there when we attempt to address our shared challenges. And certainly, when it comes to mental health, physical health, or public health in general, I believe it's more than policy and structure. It's about culture, values, and identity. What it requires you and me at this moment in time is to recenter ourselves on a core set of values. Values that we don't talk about often enough, but which must be at the heart of what informs our programs and our policies and our practices in our own lives, which ultimately would guide us to the place where we need to go and be truly living a healthy and meaningful life, something I believe what we all want. Our values are a moral compass. Youth today are facing a dizzying array of choices: how to communicate, where to spend their time, how to find the tribe they belong to, what to do with their lives. Our moral compass is what anchors us in making those decisions when presented with choices. And if that compass is unclear and signals us in the wrong direction, then we will be led astray. It's why I feel that at this moment, when not just the youth, but all generations worldwide are worried about the future, feeling cynical, confused, and despondent, when despair is on the rise, This is a time for us to double down on those values of kindness, generosity, service, and love, to not just talk about them, but to live them. These are the healing that we are called to be part of. It's about how we take those values and use them to inform the issues we raise in the public square, the policies that we advocate for, and the leaders we choose to support. This is how values can ripple out and affect the fundamental underpinnings of society if we allow them to. For the record, I believe it's a moral obligation to lift people up the best we can in times of adversity. Each of us have a role to play in this moral awakening and becoming better ancestors to help others recognize this invisible web of connection is the antidote to this worldview that's not serving us very well. We are meant to offer our drop into the ocean of connection to bolster each other for the times ahead. The question I often reflect on comes from one of the leading system expert, Elizabeth Solon. How does the solution to whatever keeps me awake at night be the solution to what keeps someone else awake at night? In other words, as I've been given to, how can I give? Now, as we walk beyond what we've been living through, we have a world to remake. We may know little, but we must trust that what is difficult is a certainty that will never abandon us, and that something is difficult must be one more reason to participate and lean in. It is up to our individual and collective sense of existence today to get there. It is up to us to foster that broader outlook to move forward, arriving at a nurturing oasis we did not know was there, and finally realizing that all along we're all just walking each other home. I hope you enjoy this conversation. This is Dr. Hossein Hosseini. Hello, Dr. Hosseini. Welcome. It's such a great pleasure to have you here. I'm so excited.
Hello, Sean. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's my pleasure to be part of this today.
One of the many reasons that I'm excited to talk to you is because I've been thinking a lot about how we navigate complexity in our lives. You know, maps, systems, connections we can't always see. And your work has taken you through so many different settings: energy, urban planning, and now mainly on mental health. And I'm curious, how do you explain this idea of being a systems scientist and systems modeler? For those who may be unfamiliar, what does it mean to look at the world through that lens?
As a system scientist, or with my current role as a systems modeler, we try to see complex problems as part of the inclusive system that they have. So we, instead of focusing on symptoms of a problem, we try to understand what is the systemic structure behind a problem that creates that behavior. So we seek dynamics that creates a specific behavior, which finally creates that symptom that we see. So if we see it as an iceberg, on top of that, we can see the symptoms of the problem. But as we go deep into the cause roots of the problem, we can see some structures and some relationship between different factors and variables that create some behaviors which finally result in some symptoms. So instead of just having a very short-term, narrow point of view about the symptoms of a problem, we see the root causes and the structures of the problem. This is how we tend to see socio-economic problems, as what you said, system scientists.
What strikes me now is that even though stigma still remains in many places, conversations on mental health has been more widely embraced and accepted. I mean, it takes time, but people of my generation seems especially open to these discussions, and we see it more frequently in our media, in schools, and even in policy debates. Yet, for so many people, or even for ourselves, the gap between awareness and actual care still remains. And from your vantage point at the Brain and Mind Center, seeing how these dialogues on mental health care unfold and evolve, how would you describe what the iceberg currently looks like?
From what we can see here in the world that we live, it is so incredible to see how mental health is now moving out of the shadows and goes into the everyday conversation of people, which is amazing, because we think it is important time for mental health to be recognized as an important, not optional issue. And because we can see these days people are open to discuss this, I think it's a good time to focus more than before on the youth mental health and how it is important for the societies to work on these issues. Having said that, yet we as a society, we do not have the right ability to provide timely, high quality care, especially when you see the recent growth rate of youth mental health services compared to its 10-year trend. We can see that the recent growth is not like before. And in some services, the recent growth is close to zero. We at the University of Sydney's Brain and Mind Center, we not only just consider the services, tools, and approaches that seek treating mental health symptoms, but also we are utilizing approaches that go beyond addressing these symptoms and instead address the broader system. I mean, the whole system that includes the mental health system. This happens within the Right Care First Time Where You Live program funded by BHP Foundation, in which our research considers topics like access to care, finding where resources can be more efficiently allocated, system-level intervention design, regional mental health policymaking, the role of digital technology, etc. These are topics that we are interested in. So it is not just about providing a better specific mental health service or more of service. It is about rethinking how we structure mental health care so that it is truly responsive to people's needs. That's what we are doing now. And we see a very good potential for youth mental health policymaking to play a critical role in system level change. Youth mental health is seen from a system level perspective rather than a narrow, siloed, and integrated one. To see what are the drivers of youth mental health and what are the main points that policies should focus on to improve the system.
Yeah, and I believe what's so powerful about the work you're doing is that it spans across so many traditional boundaries, from access to care, resource allocation, to system design. There's remarkable potential. And I've learned from my own experiences that breaking down silos essentially requires a lot of good listeners to bring out that potential, and also excellent translator that can bridge between worlds. And when you're sitting with people who deeply cares about these issues but doesn't always speak the language of system modeling, how do you take something complex and technical and turn it into a language that invites people in? I'm so curious about that part.
So we are using maps in our everyday travel, right? It helps us to see where we are and where we want to go and what is the best route. So imagine a map of mental health system in which we can see the flow of individuals seeking for help and going into the system into different pathways to different services. They wait for receiving a specific service and then they receive a service. The services could be, for example, mental health related general practice sessions, the specialized services, which refer to psychiatrists or other allied mental health professionals, or community mental health care services, or services provided in emergency departments or psychiatric admitted care, online services, etc. So individuals come to the system seeking for help and then receiving the service. This flow could be impacted by the demand for services or help-seeking behavior, and also is the services delivered is based on the available capacity of those services in the system. And of course, when an individual receives a service, there is a recovery rate related to the service.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a map now.
Yes.
In different point of that map, there is a service, and people are going through this map to receive a service. Now add a very important component to this map, whose dynamics happens before the service sector, which is the psychological distress sector. You can group people into different groups based on their psychological distress level. For example, one group should be those with low level of distress, and another one could be moderate, another one could be high level of distress. Now you can see that this sector of the map is now connected to the other one, because the demand for services is completely based on the level of distress and disorder. So we can see that when something changes here in the distress sector, the flow of people into that map increases. Or once they receive the service, it could result in moving back from, for example, from higher level of distress to lower level of distress. So a movement in that map could result in a movement in this one. Now, if you are interested to see how people move from, for example, low distress to moderate distress, we should take care of the factors which impact distress onset. And there are a couple of factors could impact that flow in the second map, which we call social determinants of this psychological distress. That could be education, employment status, homelessness, family and domestic violence, social connectedness, social cohesion, etc. There are lots of risk factors that increases or decreases the flow of people from one group to another. So now we have two main parts of the map. One is the service sector, another one is the people with psychological distress, different levels. Now add to that one sector for each of those social determinants. For example, imagine the education sector, which includes the flow of people coming to primary education and then going to the secondary education and then going to the post-secondary education. While we know that psychological distress, being in high levels of psychological distress, could increase the dropping out from school or not finishing a university degree, for example, we know that this could impact the employment status. For example, could increase the unemployment. And then that unemployment could increase the flow of people from low levels of distress to high levels of distress. So we added another two sectors from social determinants to our map. So as we go this way, our map is becoming complete and complete. So having the service sector connected to psychological distress, and then we can see the mutual impact of psychological distress with other sectors which are not in the health system. They are in education, economy, etc. This is what we have created. We have created a simulation model which simulates the flow in this map that I already explained, from each point to another point. Now, as the map that we use every day to see if we wanted to go to that specific point, what is the best route? This is what exactly we do with our simulation model. We want to improve youth mental health outcomes here in Australia. So we define the destination. what is the best route. What we have created within that simulation model is an interface which users could change some sort of things in the system. For example, increasing digital technologies or online services, or cutting that service or adding another component, or changing the way that we have delivered so far a specific service to see what is the impact on people and how it increases or decreases the flow in the system, and finally, how it impacts the whole system. While the traditional tools in this atmosphere are short-term with a focus on just health system, our modeling focus is long-term with the whole system rather than just use mental health service system. It enables policymakers with a powerful tool to analyze what they think about the improvement strategies before they implement. And also it provides a good advocacy tool for the young people with lived experience or other community members to understand the system and to work with the tool to shout their needs, their real needs based on what they see. This is what we do. Hope it makes sense.
It does, and the map analogy, in finding that best route really brings this to life to me. So to sort of summarize it in a fairly simple way, instead of just seeing isolated mental health services within a society, this multi-layered thinking process, this modeling process can help us see the whole journey, how people with different levels of distress move through various surfaces, and how these social factors, social determinants affect individuals' mental health journey. So, in other words, modeling can test drive solutions and provide scenarios for complex problems. Now, everything is so connected. I believe we all create these mental models and maps in our minds too to make sense of the world. But sometimes our personal maps fail us. We are human, and sometimes our confirmation bias represents how we draw illogical conclusions from accurate assumptions, and sometimes we mix up causation and correlation and build logical conclusions on faulty assumptions. In terms of the approach of bringing different people into the modeling, I'm curious, has there ever been a moment when someone's lived experience changed how you understood the system?
I'm explaining in two parts. One part is how we engaged people and the different stakeholders in this research. And then how this model helped us understanding some unexpected behavior in the system, which is one of the benefits of having these complex models. We used a participatory approach in our research because, as I said, youth mental health is a complex system with different components from different sectors. And I think one of the major problems here is that we have many professionals focusing in just one part of the system for many years. And then it is very difficult for them to decide about the whole system and the connection between their own area with other parts in youth mental health system. And if we go beyond that, the connection between the whole mental health system with the broader system, including education, housing, etc., that we already discussed. One of the, I think, benefits of participatory approach is that it engages stakeholders from the beginning when we define the main problem and when we define and design the research project. And that's so important because from the beginning, when if you define and articulate the problem definition inappropriately, then it is very difficult to reach to an answer for the right question, because as the need of people in mental health atmosphere is already there, what we need to do is to design a policy package that covers that one.
I see.
In the participatory approach, we use viewpoints and knowledge from different stakeholders, all organizations that are doing something in this atmosphere from different sectors. And most importantly, we use the knowledge from the young people with lived experience, which is a crucial part of this program. So in one of our workshops, in which we invite people from different organizations, we ask youth with lived experience to explain how they navigate through the system, where they started, where they went through, what services, and how they went through the next step, etc. It was amazing to capture that knowledge, because that happened already in the system. We are not going to model an ideal system. We want to model it as is. It was very important to capture their point of view and how they see the system. I think it is very important, not for me as the modeler, but for all service providers to capture this knowledge and to accept this point of view, because we want to solve their problem, not our problem. And that's an important point. So we not only just take that knowledge as an input for mapping, but also we took that knowledge to formulate the simulation model. And then we collaborated with young people to effectively design interventions and improvement scenarios. And then we didn't finish here. We tried to empower the young people by how to use this model, how to use the interface to simulate some scenarios of improvement, and how to create some insights out of that for policymakers. So the policymaker this time is not just hearing from us, the researchers, is hearing from the young people. One of the initiatives that we have done within this program is that we have created a national youth lived experience reference group, which really enables us to better use that knowledge, the real world knowledge in our program. So I can say that this research project is not just a modeling project. We try to facilitate the management of system level change in youth mental health system in Australia.
Yeah.
So I'm moving to the next part about some unexpected things that we see when we have these models, because of the complexity of the system and the fact that it includes many different factors from different parts in both in mental health system and outside of that. It is very difficult sometimes to forecast what will happen if we do something. One of the examples is that when we increase the flow of people from one part of the system to another one, in hope that we improve one part, but it could make a new problem in the other part. For example, when we focus on some awareness programs in the society, for example, about youth mental health, like awareness raising campaigns in media or schools about youth mental health, this is a point other than mental health services system. Could be in the schools, in education system. What happens if education system thinks that, okay, it is the right time to increase the awareness of youth mental health, and starts doing the campaign without consulting with mental health services to see if they got enough service to serve the young people, because that campaign will increase the flow of people to the service system in the short term. If we should know, if the service system got the ability to increase the service capacity in short term so quickly, this is what happens during the COVID, for example. A short term increase of demand for services which couldn't be responded. So we can see long waiting times, increasing distress, because people now understand what is this fatigue, for example, that I'm experiencing. It could be a sign for depression. I'm going to look for services, but there's no one help me. So it brings another distress, which was not there before. And then service disengagement. If there is a long waiting time, you won't wait for service for a couple of weeks. And then we will see workforce fatigue, because they have to work more than before, because there is no new capacity coming, but they have to serve the demand. We can see that how the system is connected, and how a change in one part could result in a bigger problem if it is not studied and not investigated completely. It really highlights for me how interconnected mental health system is, not only within the mental health system, but also with the other systems that are in relationship with this sector.
Yeah, I understand. It can be daunting and tricky, especially when people's well-being at stake. You have to put a lot of care and thought into that. They're not just numbers. More or less, I believe we all live in these silos to some extent, right? When we navigate the world, and our own professional bubbles, our specialized knowledge can become both our strength and sometimes our blinders. I wonder, when you reflect on your own journey to seeing these connections in a bigger picture, what mindsets or practices do you think help break down these walls between silos? Is there something any of us could cultivate that might help us see the world not just as separate pieces, but more as a web of relationships?
Yeah, I think this is the power of systems thinking, which gives you the insight to see the big picture and to understand how a system in general works, and learn some general rules about system structure and behavior, and how feedback is structured in the system could shape the behavior, and that the behavior over time could result in a symptom, and how different is long-term and short-term point of view, and how it impacts decision-making and policy-making. When it comes to mental health, and specifically youth mental health, because there is more human factors there, it is even more complex. So yeah, I think the main keyword here is systems thinking, and as a tool within systems thinking, systems modeling, and the approach we used, which is system dynamics modeling, is a very powerful tool to see these interconnectedness and how our decisions create feedbacks that finally impact us.
After the break, more from Dr. Hossein Hosseini. When you and a team bring people together who see the world through such different lenses, researchers, educators, clinicians, decision makers, and of course people with lived experience, there must be moments of connections and understanding. Also, moments of tension when people are negotiating and trying to reach their own goal. Can you share more about how system modeling and systems thinking can help people collaborate and communicate better?
Yeah, my background is socio-economic systems engineering. So in that atmosphere, everything is designed to work in sync. But it is not a surprise for me to see decision makers, or let's say in more general terms, stakeholders of included in a system, see the system in a disconnected, siloed point of view. And that's one of the big problems. We don't see the problem as a part of the inclusive system. We can't see the feedbacks that our decisions create. In these policy-oriented problems, the main problem is not the impact of specific solution. The main problem is that different stakeholders see the problem in a different way. And that's why they don't come to a conclusion about the best solution. But these mapping tools and the simulation model at the end will help them to reach to a common understanding. And that's a very powerful tool to have. If different stakeholders thinks that that solution or the other one is better one, let's try it. Let's try it in the model. We call it a virtual vote. Try what you think in the virtual vote instead of the real vote to see the impact. So with our best knowledge so far, this model could replicate. I can see a positive trend of accepting these kind of tools, the behavior of the real world system. So it is better to test our hypothesis of what could be better in the model before we implement it.
Yeah, tiny experiments in the virtual world. I like that. And also good feedback flows back to reinforce the systems and help it evolve. I'm curious about some specific examples on how the important work that you do lands in the real world of policy. Have you noticed in your experience a shift in how policymakers in Australia respond to these approaches?
I think here in Australia, different stakeholders now understand the potential of these kind of decision support tools and how they can help them, not just policymakers, but also all stakeholders to reach to a common perspective and solution. For example, in our program, we developed 8 models. So far, a couple of them are ready and finished, and some other regional models are going to be developed. In one of our sites, there was a specific service designed for a narrow proportion of the population in that region, which was a really well-designed intervention for that share of population. When we developed the model, it was surprising for the service provider to see that when we double the uptake rate of that service, the impact on the whole system is almost nothing. And the first time, there was like, there should be something wrong in the model. And we tried to show them, okay, that's a good intervention for those specific people. But when it comes to system level or population level improvements, that small proportion of population, if we improve their life by 2 times than before, when we accumulate the whole thing over the population, the change is almost nothing. It doesn't mean that that intervention is unnecessary. It doesn't mean that we should cut down that service. No, it means that if we are looking for population level improvement, we should design something else. And that's a good example of how useful is this tool for policymakers, because they can see these kind of conversations. I have worked for a couple of countries. I can see that policymakers in different countries, they are looking for improvements because they're doing something that doesn't work sometimes. It doesn't mean that they're not looking for it. They're looking for improvements, but they should be equipped with some tools like this one to work on the best options. And yes, this is one of the tools that is attracting attention of policymakers here in Australia, specifically in public health, and it is promising, and I'm so happy to be part of this.
So in order to build these systems, circling back to your analogy, these maps to help us navigate, you need to balance between inclusion and expertise. Diverse voices provide input to ground and build the model accurately, and skilled interpreters, technicians, to make sense of what it reveals. It's so interesting because the balance between these things makes me wonder about boundaries and limitation. Can you walk me through the process of when to draw the line so the model is complete enough to be useful without trying to capture the entire universe? And how those boundaries shift when you're speaking with fellow modelers, researchers, versus when you're working with policymakers?
Yes, that's a very good question. Of course, we cannot model everything, and we cannot include the whole world in deciding about some specific problems. Yet, boundary setting is one of the main parts that we do in the beginning of research, systems modeling research, in two directions, both the different sectors that we should include and the depths of modeling in each sector. We should decide about these two aspects in the beginning. For example, do we need to separate men and women in our models or not? We have different group of population in our models differentiated by age, because that's important. The impact of unemployment, for example, on the onset of psychological distress for a person who is 25 years old and above is something different for a person who is 12 years old. And also, we should know that, for example, if the gambling is an important thing to include in the model or not, because it impacts mental health and it could impact distress. So we use what we do to decide about the model boundary is that we use the evidence shown in the literature. So based on the literature, if we could see an association between two sectors, for example, between substance misuse and suicidal behavior, yes, we capture that. So the next step is when we saw something in the literature and is supported by the data, we present it to the stakeholders to see what is their background knowledge of the real relationship of those two sectors in the real world. Always we tend to talk to people from both sides, both sectors, to see how they see the relationship. If we found evidence and knowledge of the system, because we need both of them. Sometimes literature says something because literature is about national studies, sometimes for different countries. But when we tend to develop a model for a specific region, we should approve that literature by the knowledge of the system in that region. So we take that evidence to the system to see if they approve or not, and then we try to include the relationship into the system. So I can say that this part of the modeling is so time-consuming and difficult because what you got at the end is highly impacted by the model boundary.
So, as the challenges we identify in these systems become more and more complex, what makes you hopeful about how these approaches can positively impact the future of mental health care? And beyond researchers and policymakers, how might teachers, parents, young people, and their everyday moments connect to the system level change you're working toward?
What gives me hope is the growing awareness and openness about mental health. This is an important thing. The shift from viewing youth mental health as an optional thing to an essential thing. I think this is one of the major things happening at the moment, which gives me hope, and how communities are getting involved in this, and how the importance of social connection and the environments and its impact on youth mental health is being seen more than before. And more importantly, the young people today are much more aware and open about mental health. This is amazing because they not only support each other, now they support us as researchers and also policymakers to help us understand what is going on so that we can help them. Another thing which brings hope to me is that all stakeholders now are understanding more than before the potential of digital mental health solutions and online services, which bring more coordination and efficiency and more access to services. These technologies are promising. For example, one of the simulations that I've done recently shows that while increasing specialized mental health services in short term requires time, for example, for workforce training and budget, digital solutions can provide critical interim support. Although for the long term, we need both of them, but in the short term, they are helpful. So I think, the second thing that brings hope to me is digital technologies. So that shift combined with digital technology progress and hopefully implementation and what we do, data-driven planning and policymaking, makes me optimistic about the future. And about the second part of your question, which was about the role of all citizens. As far as it relates to me as the modeler, I think we should not focus on just technical aspects of the modeling. As an academic, if I live just in here, in academia, yes, I'm interested in those technical aspects. But if I believe in system thinking and I see the connection between academia and the broader society, so I should know that I'm creating a tool to be useful and to be used by the whole stakeholders. And the major part of that society are citizens who could be impacted by the policies that this model and modeling approach will offer at the end. So I got 2 points here. One is that we should engage as much as we can in the process, from model building to policy insights that we conclude at the end. And that's why we use participatory approach. We try to select representatives from different parts of the society, communities, organizations, people with lived experience, etc., in our modeling approach. Second, we should design some user-friendly tools at the end that are intentionally designed for non-technical modelers. And this is exactly what we try to do, to develop an online interface that those who are engaged in our workshops and our modeling could access. So I think with tools like this, people will have a better and clearer understanding of the whole picture, what happens, and empowered to advocate for what they need.
Now, as we're coming to a close, there's so much in my head that I'm reflecting on right now. Looking at these connections between systems that most of us experience as separate, I believe now more than ever, we need to recognize that no man is an island, and we're all part of something larger than ourselves. Also, system thinking can be trained like a muscle that can help us design better solutions and maybe shape how we move through the world. And I'm curious, Dr. Hosseini, has there ever been a moment in your life when you felt that deep sense of wholeness or oneness, or insights you gain when you experience yourself as an inseparable thread in this collective whole?
Yeah, I think it is so important to know that if everyone's action could have an impact in the whole, for the whole system. I mean, because of that interconnectedness that we already discussed, every small action that we do as a researcher, as a lived experience person who tries to share their experience, as a clinician, as a teacher in school, etc., all these got an impact on what we think should be done. So that is, my insight is that we shouldn't stop ourselves from taking small actions about something that we think is correct. So based on what I do, we always try to create that big picture so everyone can understand what is going on. I think that's the main step, because once everyone understands how the system works and what is the situation, then everyone can adjust himself or herself in the system and know that, okay, what I should do now is this part. And I think, of course, if all the stakeholders act in an integrated way and aligned to each other, the impact will be much more. But I don't think that each individual action is not impactful. And I think all of us should do something about what we think, even with very small steps, but we should continue on that.
Thank you so much for this conversation, Dr. Hosseini. I'm genuinely grateful for your time and insights, and mental health care is a topic that is close to my heart, and I trust that our listeners will be thinking about this in new ways too.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my real pleasure to talk about these interesting things with you, and I hope it is interesting for your audience as well.
Before we wrap up, is there anything you'd like to share about where people can learn more about your work or the Brain and Mind Center's initiatives?
Yes, I will share some links and materials with your audience. So if they are interested, they can follow what we do here in Brain and Mind Center.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And that's the show. If something in this episode moved you, make sure to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you want to go above and beyond, share it with someone who might need to hear this and tag us at HappenusPod on Instagram. To learn more about Dr. Hosseini's work and the mission of the Brain and Mind Center at the University of Sydney, check out the show notes at happenuspod.com. While you're there, you can also subscribe to my Substack newsletter for deeper dives into each episode. Every share, every review helps keep these conversations going. I want to express my gratitude to my guest Dr. Hossein Hosseini for his time and wisdom, and to Professor Joanne Akinpidi at the University of Sydney for making this episode possible. It was really special for me to continue this conversation even further with the both of you in person while in Sydney. I also want to say a special thank to my friend Maximilian Kessler for sharing his ideas before the recording, and Kaylam for a gorgeous original illustration as the cover art. If you're curious to explore more conversations related to this one, I recommend previous episodes featuring the legendary conservationist Dr. Jane Goodall, Microsoft's research lead Glenn Weil, and neuropolitical scientist Dr. Lia Yu. I'm Sean Hong. Thank you for listening to Happenus. We'll be back with a brand new episode soon. Till next time, take care and so long.